Let's turn just about anything into an art asset, game asset, or even a 3D print using the free and open source power of photogrammetry. This video aims to be a one-stop shop to really get a running start with photogrammetry. I'm amazed that more people aren't using photogrammetry for absolutely everything, and that's the purpose of this video. I want to show you the entire workflow. This is a combination of over a year of learning on my part, and it's going to cover everything. 3D printing, art assets, game assets, it's all in this video, meaning that it's quite a big video. Now it's sectioned out pretty easy. The first one is all about getting photogrammetries themselves, the photo taking, the objects you use, and all that. Then we've got the actual photogrammetry and how to get a photogrammetry end result. Then we have 3D printing workflow. Then we have the asset workflow. And then we have some extra hints and tips right at the end. With that all said, what's up? I'm Jonathan and welcome to Maker Tales, where I'm sharing my maker journey to help you go further in yours. If you enjoyed this video and you find it useful, I'd really appreciate it if you give it a thumbs up. This video is sponsored by Rendero. Just in case you don't know what photogrammetry is, in a nutshell, it's where you take a whole bunch of photos and using some silicon magic, it spits out a 3D textured model. To start off, let's talk about what exactly you can take a photogrammetry of. The short answer is almost anything. That being said, the more reflective or transparent something is, the harder it's going to get, to the point that it's almost impossible. But we'll talk more about these impossible cases near the end of the video. Also remember not to limit yourself to only objects. You can do photogrammetries of spaces like rooms, buildings, and environments. Now, when it comes to taking photos, you can get as complicated or as simple as you like. You can do this indoors or outdoors, but I find I get my best results outdoors on an overcast day, as we're doing our best to get rid of any shadows, so be sure that there's no harsh light. A simple test for shadows is to wave your hand about 30 centimeters above your other hand and see if there are any noticeable shadows. Lastly, if you really want to get involved about lighting and create as much of a diffuse light setup as possible, pair up an overcast day with a few lights. Now, this is really not needed unless you're really trying to create some amazing digital assets. I usually skip the lights. Now, when it comes to holding the object you're about to do a photogrammetry of, it's best to raise it up in some way, be it with a toilet roll, an egg cup, or a stack of magnets. What we are trying to do here is remove the bottom shadow of the ground and give ourselves a greater visibility of the overall object. Also, be sure that however it's held up, it does not move around or have a chance of falling off easily halfway through taking the photos, as you cannot move your object while you're taking your photos. If the object moves for whatever reason, you have to start from scratch. Plus, try your best not to cast any shadows on it while you're taking photos, as we're trying to do our best to keep the lighting as consistent as possible. Of course, for spaces and larger objects, a lot of this is just not possible. Now, I'm sure some of you are wondering, how can I do this in a studio with a white background? Well, the short answer is you don't. It's more of a pain than it's worth, and the software we're using in this video actually needs the background to create some stunning results. Now, when it comes to actually taking your photos, you can use pretty much anything, be it your phone or a bigger camera. Just to show you, here on the left, you see the results from a phone, and here on the right, you see them from a camera. Both of them are done with 100 images. If you're using your phone, make sure you're using something like a pro mode or an app that lets you lock down all your camera settings, as they need to not change while you're taking all your photos. And if you're using a camera, make sure you are in manual and crank up that f-stop, as we really need to keep as much of the object in focus. Finally, it comes to the point of actually taking your photos. I find that the easiest way of thinking of it is to put yourself in the perspective of a computer. I know, it's a little bit weird, but here it is, the mindset to keep. As a computer, unless you take a picture of it, I don't know it exists. And on top of that, if there isn't another photo that significantly overlaps the one that you've just shown me by 40 or 60%, then I don't know where it exists. So keeping that in mind, it's time to start taking photos. A lot of photos. At a minimum, I would recommend 75, but in all honesty, I find I get my best results at about 100 to 150 photos for something that I can hold in my hands, 200 to 400 for something about the size of the average adult, and just go crazy for anything bigger. The overall rule is that it's better to overshoot and not use images than undershoot and wish you took more. Now yes, I know that is a lot of photos, but trust me, it goes a lot faster than you think. and I only go into the hundreds because I really like to keep the details in my photogrammetries. With time, you'll learn the level of detail that you're happy with and start to see the correlation between the number of photos that you take and the detail that you get out. Lastly, as long as you keep the computer mindset while taking your photos, there are no real rules to what distance you should stay at. You can even take close-ups of parts that you would like to have extra definition, and if you really want to push the envelope and risk it a little, you can even use multiple different cameras and lenses. But this might affect the overall color of the final texture if you care about that. As you can see, I usually work my way around in full circles, changing my angle of capture after every full circle. Once I've gone around a few times, I then focus on the detail and the awkward to reach spots. Now, if you're interested in following along, or you don't have the best weather to do photogrammetry right now, down in the description I have a few different photogrammetry image sets free for you to download to get making right now. And now that you have a lovely set of photogrammetry images, be it provided by me or that you have taken, let's look at the program we'll be using, which is Meshroom by Alice Vision. If you haven't heard about Meshroom, you're about to be blown away. Completely free and open source bit of software here that does so much more than just photogrammetry. I strongly suggest you go here and check it out. We're going to go to try Meshroom now, and straight away on their download page, you're going to see there isn't a Mac version. Don't worry, Mac users, you can use what I use, which is Rendero, this video's sponsor, or you can give it a go trying to use Google Colab. Now, I haven't done this. It's quite an involved method. It's linked down in the description with that link as well as a video. And lastly, for everyone, you need a NVIDIA CUDA enabled GPU to run this version of Meshroom. With that said, as it's open source, someone has created a branch that doesn't need this, and that is also linked down in the description. Now, just before you download the version of Meshroom that you'll be using, hear me out. I want to talk about this video's sponsor, Rendero. Rendero is a cloud computer, literally a desktop in the cloud, and it's incredible. Just to give you an idea, I'm actually using it right this minute for this video, and I have zero lag, and I'm in the middle of nowhere in Scotland, so you can imagine you're going to have a pretty good connection too. They're pushing very hard to creatives because they know that we use a lot of power and we need a scalable workstation, and that's exactly what they're providing here. Their pricing is extremely reasonable as well. It's only $49 a month. That's about $1.60 a day, and that gives you free basic power. So they charge $49 for 1 terabyte of space, and then the basic power you basically have to pay per hour. But with this tier right here, you get almost as much as you can use for free. Now, if you're only going to be doing 1 or 2 photogrammetries, still check out this 7-day trial for $7, because the main reason I've paired up with Rendero for this video is, well, when you're doing a photogrammetry, your computer is going to be a potato because the CPU will be at 100% and you will not be able to use your computer whatsoever. I truly warn you about that. Your computer will be a potato for maybe a couple of hours or a day or two, depending on the size of your photogrammetry. With that said, if you want to use Rendero, there is a link down in the description, and it really helps out MakerTales. Obviously, I'm using Rendero right now, so I'm going to download this Windows version. I'm going to click it, download, start it. That's going to take a second or two because I'm using Rendero and I'm a server, so that means I get 3 gigabit upload and download. With my file now obviously downloaded, what you're going to get is a zip folder, and you just have to unzip it and you get this folder. This folder, you can put it anywhere you want. I put it in my documents. Inside of here, there's this application. I've right-clicked it and put send to my desktop to create a little shortcut, or you can just double-click the application and this will run Meshroom for the first time. Now, I completely understand that the first time you open up Meshroom, it can look very overwhelming and a little bit alien, especially if you've never worked with a node structure before. But trust me, this is a lot simpler than it looks, and I find that the easiest way of learning this is by just actually doing it. And we're going to do exactly that by bringing in our photogrammetry image set right here to where it says drop image files. It's as simple as drag and dropping it in there. Now, Meshroom has many different ways of creating photogrammetries. There's something called live reconstruction. There's also something called augmented reconstruction. Well, basically, I'm going to be showing you the way that I find 99% of the time I use photogrammetry. If you want to find out about augmented as well as live, I will put links down in the description so you can find out more about them. Now with our images in, Meshroom's UI is already starting to become a lot more self-explanatory. Right here, you get a whole bunch of thumbnails of all the images that you've imported into Meshroom, and this here is obviously an image viewer. The last bits of the UI is a 3D viewer, which we'll talk about later, and down here the graph editor, we'll talk about that in just a moment. However, right now I think would be a great point to talk about how many images you actually need for photogrammetry. I would say that the minimum is about 50. I find that if I go less than 50, I just get a whole bunch of failed photogrammetry attempts, and that is just very annoying. Just so you get an idea, here's a side-by-side of the 50 images and 100 images. There's not that much of a difference, but the bigger the object is, the bigger the difference there'll be. The 50 images only took 1 hour and 15 minutes, yet the 100 images took 4 hours and 15 minutes, and this was all done within Rendero's basic plan. So imagine 100 images for this tiny little ammonite right here, and trust me, it would not surprise me with some bigger models or bigger spaces that you go into 150, 200, or even 400 images, and I have heard it many times of people leaving Meshroom to run for days. So really take a look at Rendero, because it's so worth it to still have access to your normal computer while the photogrammetry is being computed up in the cloud. It is brilliant. With that all said, the most important step right this minute is to save what we've just started. So I'm going to go here to File, Save As. I'm going to save mine right here, but do keep in mind, wherever you save this, you need a lot of space, and I am talking about a lot of space. This one little project of 102 images is going to use up 10 gigabytes of space because the Meshroom cache files are huge. I have other projects of around 200 or so images that go all the way up to 48 gigabytes. So just be aware of that giant space requirement for Meshroom's cache. At this point, you have a decision to make. You could press that very big green start button up at the top that's very tempting, and I strongly would not recommend this because, as I've just said, you'll be waiting 4 hours for the outcome of this. And, well, if you press that green button, you will have no idea what is going to come out at the other end. If you follow this workflow though, I will show you how you get to see glimpses and refine what exactly is going to be coming out right at the end. So we're going to be working in the graph editor, so we need to understand how to move around in it. Well, to move around, you can use your scroll wheel to zoom in and out, hold down the middle mouse button to pan around, and if you don't have that, you can hold down Shift, hold down the left click, and that lets you move around as well. I don't know how to zoom in without a middle mouse button, so maybe take a look online. Maybe you can use gesture on a laptop. If you get yourself completely lost, just press this Fit All, and that will fit it all onto the screen like this. Now lastly, before we dive into this, we need to know a little bit more of what exactly is going on down here. Now we don't need to know it in great detail, but a nice little overview would be fantastic, and you get exactly that here on the Alice Vision website. Go to Photogrammetry, and here it really starts to explain to you what exactly is happening, what it's looking for, and so much more. I really would suggest reading that. Now that you know how to find out more information about the nodes, the one I want to show you is Structure from Motion. We want to compute up to this point because it's a very important node. It creates something called a point cloud for us, as well as all the virtual cameras of where we took our photos for our photogrammetry set. To get this to compute up to this point, select it, right click it, and select Compute. At this point, it basically just queues up all the processes up to this point right here. As you can see, green is already processed, orange is currently processing, blue is going to be processed, and you do get these as well. So if I press stop right this minute, this magenta means that it's stopped. You also get red, and red basically means that there's an error. Usually I find that the error is that the cache has been corrupted in some way, shape, or form. So go into the cache files, and I'll show that later on in this video. Delete them and just try and do this again. To start this up once again, it's literally just open it up, right click, compute, and let this go. At this point, the potatoing of your computer begins. Just to show you, I'll open up the task manager here inside of Rendero, and you will see that we are going to be at close to 100% CPU right this moment. There you have it. This is the official potatoing of your computer. Now, just to let you know, in rough time estimations, this here for this set of 102 images is going to take around about 1 hour to compute inside of Rendero's basic plan. With that said, what I'm going to do is I'll leave this running and then I'll come back to you once we're at a point that this is finished. With our structure from motion now computed, let's take a look at what exactly it's created here. Now, I like to make this a little bit bigger so I really get to see what I'm working with. And to move around in the space, it's pretty simple. You use your scroll wheel to zoom in, hold down your middle mouse button to pan around, and this sort of trackball thing is what's the main origin point of where you're rotating. By rotating, you hold down the left click and that lets you rotate. So you basically just need to go by eye to about there, or you can double click and that sort of snaps it into place to one of the points. First thing we should do here is just take a look at all the cameras, see that that looks about right. It does. So what I want to do is now hide them by just dragging that all the way down. Now I no longer really need my trackball. I'll move this just a little bit more that way. Check that this is really nicely on my ammonite right there. But once I have that in place, I'm going to hide my trackball and hide my grid. Now, if you get yourself completely lost and you have no idea what to do, all you have to do is right click, reset view. That puts you back to where you were right at the beginning, or go fit all and it fits absolutely everything on the screen. Now, with that all said, let's get ourselves back to our ammonite there so that we can really observe it pretty well and double check that it is exactly as we're expecting. So I like to get myself nice and close to the final object that I'm trying to export as a photogrammetry. I will turn off my trackball now. I will make the points smaller to really be able to see what I'm making here. And you know what? This is exactly it. Right here, this is letting me know that this overall is going to come out how I expect it to come out. Now, the next point is a real hard hitter. It is the depth map. We're going to go to it, right click, hit compute, and this takes around about 2 hours using Rendero's basic plan, which is not a soft computer. So be aware that this is one of the big chunks right this minute that you're going to have to compute. And I'll come back once that's done. Now with the depth map completed, it's time to get to the magical point of meshing. Before you go and do the computing up to meshing, we need to very much set up a custom bounding box. If not, we're going to compute all of this extra data that we really do not need. So all we have to do is select this bounding box, and if you don't see it, double click it and then it'll pop up. It's usually pretty big within the scene, and all you have to do is use these little gizmo controls to move this to the correct point that you're looking for. So for me, it's something around there. And then once you've moved it to the right spot, go and use these little scale points to scale this down to the right size for you. Now I'm quite happy with how my bounding box is right this minute, and I only have one main bit of photogrammetry geometry that I want to take out from here. So I can actually just jump straight over to texturing. Now the main reason why I'm saying that is here on mesh filtering, there is a setting which is keep only the largest mesh. If your photogrammetry has more than one mesh, so things that are floating around in the air, you might not want to click this. But for me, obviously, I do want to click this. So I'm going to turn this on and I'm going to compute all of these all the way up to texturing. One last thing, here in texturing, you can change this to a different texture size. Many people like to use 4K. I quite enjoy 8K. It's just because I like to look at pretty images, even though I don't use it within 3D printing. For 3D printing, you very much need to compute just up to meshing, but texturing is pretty cool to have anyway, because it does not take that long. And in fact, all of these right here, when we set them to compute, is only going to take around about 45 minutes, and that's using, again, Rendero's basic processing. And for those of you who are making art or game assets, you might want to change your unwrapping method to LSCM. I'm quite fine with basic, and I'll show you how I create assets using the basic one. Now, with all that said, let's right click and compute, and I'll see you with the end result. With everything now computed, we can finally see what we've created. Now, it might not be inherently obvious exactly what's going on here right this minute, but trust me, all you have to do is double click texturing to make sure the texturing comes up here. And then all you have to do is hide all of these right here. Once you've hid all of those, you will see your lovely final photogrammetry created, and it will usually blow you away just how great it comes out. For those of you that are doing 3D printing and only went up to mesh filtering, what you'll basically have is your mesh filter, which will look something like this. Now you might be wondering, where on earth is this? The quickest way to get there, just go right click, open folder. The other answer to this is wherever you have saved your file, there is a Meshroom cache. And this is what I was talking about right at the beginning when I said when things go wrong, you have to go in here and delete things. So go into here and you'll see that every single operation has a nice little folder to it. So when something goes wrong, go to that folder, delete it, and try it again. If things carry on going wrong, there is a wiki and a manual, and that is linked down in the description. For those of you doing 3D printing that only went to mesh filtering, go into your mesh filtering, open that file, and you'll see there's a .obj in there. And for those of you that went all the way to texturing, well, you will have a file in here. You open that up and you have your OBJ in there. So now let's open this up within Blender. Now, as a very quick note, for those of you that don't know what Blender is, this is a completely free and open source tool that does so much, from video editing to 3D modeling to visual effects, you name it, it does it. It's incredible. But I understand that's quite a big pill to swallow, but don't worry, I have an entire free course that goes through all the theory of how to use Blender through precision modeling. Now, this is a pure theory course and you will learn pretty much how to use Blender very deeply, but I understand it's not the most enjoyable way of learning. If you want to learn through projects, I'm currently working on a course that will come out real soon, and you can check down in the description to see if it's already out. Sign up to the updates and I will let you know as soon as that's out. Now, with that all said, let's jump into Blender and see what we've created in detail. Now in Blender, let's import our final result. I'm going to go pretty quick here because I would expect that you know Blender, and if you don't know Blender, I just pointed you towards my course. We go to File, Import, and OBJ. Here, you just need to go to where you saved your file. So for me, it's right here inside of my fossil. Video capture, Meshroom, texturing. So if you didn't do texturing, it's inside of mesh filtering. And I'm just going to open this up. It can take a little bit because this is around 600,000 faces. As I have my Blender set up in millimeters, it comes in really small, but don't worry about it. It's still all here. So you can see it's come in brilliantly and it's really great. I'm just going to quickly get this to a scale that I quite like and put it in the center. For those of you doing game assets, don't worry, you don't really have to do this right now. So this here is my final end result of texturing. It's actually an extremely clean model and I'm really happy with this. You can see if we click on the texturing, it comes in with all the textures as well because it pulls it from the MTL file. I think that's this file structure. Now, the very quick and dirty way of cleaning this up right this minute is basically to do a modify decimate. So I'm just going to do that right this minute. We're going to go into our modifiers, add a decimate right here. I'm going to crank this all the way down to maybe a 0.2. And here we have it, we've decimated down to 0.2, and you can see we've removed quite a few. We had 600,000. Now this is just the point where we still have a decent amount of resolution, but we haven't lost too much. Now I would not recommend this workflow at all, but it can work. For those of you that come with holes and all over the place with your photogrammetry, well, there's a lot of stuff to learn within Blender, and all I can really say is go check out my course. It's free, it's there, and it has all the information for you. If not, this video would be 3 hours long. And if you're having a really problematic mesh or you don't want to deal with Blender at all, use an online service like Make Printable. They basically repair meshes really quickly and they have a lovely little Blender add-on, but of course you do have to pay per download using their online service. Now, as for the best workflow, here's what I want to talk to you about. It's called Instant Meshes, and I kid you not, this is absolute witchcraft. The link is down in the description, and all you have to do is come down here to where it says precompiled binaries, download the one for you. For me, it's obviously Windows. This will download a zip, which you just extract, and you'll have an exe in it. I'm going to put this on my desktop right here because I'm going to be using this from now on. We'll close this little window, double click it, and that will start Instant Meshes. In a nutshell, Instant Meshes is a quad retopologizing program that does some incredible stuff. For those of you doing video game assets, this is the point for you to skip ahead because what I'm going to do here is we're going to first edit it up for 3D printing. So with 3D printing in mind, let's open up our OBJ once again. I'm going to go with my texturing result here. I'll double click and click on my OBJ. This now takes just a little moment. You have to wait for instant meshes to basically open up, and here you'll have your OBJ ready. And this is really simple. We're wanting to keep a decent amount of resolution in here, so I'm going to crank this up to maybe 100K. It's going to give you a little bit of a warning saying, hey, you're going to need to subdivide to be able to get that type of resolution. Just click OK and give it a chance to compute. Now with that done, all you have to do is click solve and solve. If you're interested in learning more about the topology side of things, there's a lot to do with that, and you'll find out more in the asset building side of this video. So we'll click solve once. This brings up this entire mesh sort of thing. Click solve again, and this gives you an idea of what the mesh will actually look like once it comes out. You know what? I'm pretty happy with this to start with, so I'll just leave that as it is, and we'll go to export mesh. We click extract mesh, and this will literally create the mesh from what we've just done there. And now we're just going to save it. I'm going to save it to the desktop as 3D print mesh. Make sure that you add the extension .obj when you save. Now back in Blender, I'm just going to hide our original mesh and import the new mesh that we just created from Instant Meshes. Once again, it comes in pretty small, so I'm just going to zoom right into it. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to right click, go origin, geometry to origin to move my geometry to the origin point. Then I'll press 1 on my number pad, rotate this round to the correct orientation, press 3 on my number pad, rotate this round to the correct orientation. Then I'll apply the rotation itself. I will change the scale up here because I want this one to actually be 58 millimeters high, and this will give me the correct scaling that I can copy and paste into the rest of my scale here. Now with that done, I'm going to see this in full once again. I will apply the scale, and now with the scale applied, I'm just going to move this up a little bit here. I'm going to do some very quick Boolean here because obviously this isn't exactly great for 3D printing right this minute. I'll import in a plane. I'll scale that up a little bit. I'll then go into edit mode and I will extrude this down by 10 millimeters. And then I'll just do a nice little Boolean cut of this to this, go Control Shift minus. And I know if you do not understand what I'm saying right this minute, it's all explained in my course and it's completely free. So just go check it out. And there we have it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to export this out and take a look inside of our slicer. So select it, go File, Export, STL, and let's take a look at it inside of Prusa Slicer. And here's our mesh inside of our slicer. It's come out absolutely brilliant. Of course, you can have this much higher resolution if you want. All you have to do is inside of Instant Meshes, just crank up that number till you're happy with the end result resolution. With it now sliced, we can see that it's come out absolutely perfect, and this is exactly the end result that we're looking for. And this here is the 3D print itself. I am really happy with it. Now let's talk about the art and game asset workflow for photogrammetry. And if you're not interested in that, remember that straight after this section, we do have some more bonus information that applies to everyone. For the asset creating workflow, it starts in Instant Meshes. Let's open up our mesh. I'm going to open up my textured mesh. I'll double click that, and then I just give Instant Meshes just a moment to open it up. Now with our high-res mesh in here, we know how important it is to get this into a low count for our games and art assets. So let's just crank this down to a number that we're quite happy with. I'm going to go with 1.9K. Now I'm going to click solve. Now what this does, it creates this matrix, so to speak, of what exactly it's going to look like. Wherever there's a crossing here, it's basically going to be a cross point. Now I want to sort of move around the quads a bit here. So I'm going to get this comb looking thing and just follow a spiral all the way around this. Once I let go, it gives it a whole bunch of information that now it's computing, and it can take a hot minute or two. You can see that the new solve now has this sort of flowing effect. I've got to do this to the other side. To rotate around, turn off the comb, then rotate around, and I'll do the same on this side. Now there's a lot more information and a lot more that you can do inside of Instant Meshes, but I'm going to keep this very top level right now. I'm just going to click solve to make sure it's all solved how we want it. Then I'm going to click the next solve here, which starts to create the mesh itself. And as you see, we've created some very nice low poly mesh here. You could go even less if you really wanted. Now let's extract the mesh. So I'll click extract, extracting mesh. And some people like to turn this up to 1 when it comes to making low poly meshes. I'm going to leave this. Actually, you know what I am? I'm going to go up to 1 here. I'm going to extract this mesh now. And here we have our low poly mesh of our photogrammetry. Now I'm going to go and save this onto my desktop as lowpoly.obj. And be sure that you add the .obj. Starting this all off in a nice fresh Blender file, I'm going to change my unit scale back to 1 because I usually work in millimeters, but when we're doing art assets, it's best to work with a 1 scale here. So I'm going to import both the low res and the high res now, and do not move them from where they get imported in. With both of these now imported, I'm just going to quickly rename this one to high res, and then I'm going to save my file. Now that everything is saved and safe, let's take a good look at what's going on right here. We have both of these meshes right on top of each other, and this is exactly what we're wanting. We're going to bake the textures and the normals from one to another. Now, this doesn't really help for baking though right this minute, because you can see they're quite intersecting. Let's grab the low poly, and let's go Shift-D to create a copy. Right-click to cancel the movement. Let's hide the low poly one and rename this one as Cage. Now, what we're going to do, it's very simple. We're going to go into edit mode, select everything here, and edge selection, because you can see we have a whole bunch of seams here. So let's right-click and go Clear Sharp. So that clears everything. With everything selected, now in face mode, I'm going to go Alt-S to start to scale up. Now, if it goes scaling up too quickly, hold down Shift and that will bring scale up just slowly. Now, what we're doing is trying to get to the point where it no longer intersects too much. Now, I'm going to be cutting off that bit there, so that doesn't really matter again. I'm going to go Alt-S, scale that up to the point that it feels that all of this is no longer intersecting. There's one more intersection point here. I'll carry on scaling that up right to about there. Anything that's important here? Nope, that is looking good. And we can always just clean that up down there later. So with that done, I'm going to press save. With our cage created, I'm going to go right click and shade this flat just to take a good look at it. I'm then going to hide the cage, hide the high res, and show the low poly. I'm going to make sure that the low poly as well is showed as flat here. Then I'm going to go into edit mode. We'll select all the edges once again, right click and clear the sharp. Now we need to create the UVs. I'm going to be creating some very dirty UVs here, so do not judge me on this. I need to keep things quick for this. So I'm just selecting an entire edge loop all the way around here. So we're going to go all the way around, selecting these. Once you have a decent loop selected, right click and mark seam. I'm also going to do a little cross section down here on the bottom, just because I'd rather have some very clean UVs. Once again, right click, mark seam. And now I'm just going to select all of the faces here, press U and unwrap. I'll quickly save with a Control S, and let's take a look at the UVs. We go to the UV editor and we can see, brilliant, some UVs have been made. Now we really want these to be as big as possible. So I'm going to grab one of these, press L, press G, and move this up to a space around here. Click here, L, G, move this around. Then I'm going to select everything up with A, press S, and scale it up. Now that I'm pretty happy that that's as big as I can get them, I'll once again save, and let's go back into the layout. From this point here, we need to start to create a material for this, because the way that baking works, it goes from one material to another. So I'm going to open up a window here. I'm going to change this window here into our shader editor. Make sure that our low poly is selected here. And inside of our normal sort of shader editing here, I'm going to create ourselves an image texture. I'll also create ourselves a normal map, and then I'll press Shift-D on this image texture to make another one. Now I'm going to connect up our color to our base color, and I will create a new texture. Now this texture needs to be the size that you did inside of Meshroom. For me, I had this as 8K, so I'm just going to times this by 8. And then I will rename this as low poly texture. With that done, I'll hit OK, and that will turn our model black if you had material preview on. Now let's do the same for the normal here. We're going to create a new texture here. The scale should be the same. I'm going to change this to low poly normal. We do not need the alpha for this. We'll click OK, and now make sure that you change your color space to non-color. We're going to connect up our color, and then we're going to connect our normal over to our normal here. Now at this point, this is a pretty good place to do another save. Control S. Now let's get set to do some baking. I'm going to bring in another window up here. I'm going to bring this to become an image editor. Now with our image editor here, and we can see our shaders down here, we're going to bring our high res back, our cage back, and everything's going to be sort of overlapping here. Now we need to set up our render settings. We're going to go over to our render properties. We're going to change this to cycles. We're going to go with a GPU compute if you can, and our render is only going to be about 8. We don't need that much, and we want things to be very quick for baking. Then we're going to carry on going down our light paths. We're going to change this down to 2. We're going to go down to where it says reflective, refractive, and turn those off. Then as we go down, we don't really need anything else in all of these, but right here where it says bake, we're going to go inside of here. We're going to start with the normals. Why not? So the bake type is I'm going to go with a normal bake, and I'm going from selected to active. So with that on, I need to go down in here, and I'm going to be using the cage one. Now I find that cage usually gives me the best results. You can always change this extrusion to 0.1 and try it without a cage, but I find for best results, the cage usually works the best. So I'm going to click on here, I'm going to select our cage, and now with our cage selected, all we have to do is make sure that we click on our normal first. Make sure nothing is selected up here, but we're going to click on our normal. Then we're going to click on our high res and then hold down Control and click on our low poly. And it has to be in that order. Make sure you do that in that order. If not, it will not work. From here, we're going to hit bake, and it takes around 45 seconds to 2 minutes. And lo and behold, we get our normal map. I will zoom out here and you see that has come out c'est magnifique, but this is not saved. So make sure you go to File, up here on the image, Save As, and save it wherever it is that you want to use it. I'll leave it to my desktop right now, hit Save As, and you know what? It's basically the exact same workflow for the texture, except where it says bake type, we're going to change this to diffuse, and we'll turn off direct and indirect contribution, because we don't really care. Now everything's already selected, but it's not in the right order. We need to make sure we select our low poly texture first. Then this is already in the right case, but what I like to do is unselect it just in case. So select this, then we're going from high res, hold down Control to low poly, and we'll hit bake once again and wait that short while. And lo and behold, we have our lovely texture. Once again, let's save this, make sure that it's saved, and now let's quickly save our file as well. Just as a little extra tip, many people swear that if you also change your tile size here to the actual size of your entire graphic, it makes things go faster, but I don't find that it's that much of a speed difference. Now let's take a look at exactly what we've created here. So I'm going to bring my windows nice and close together once again. I'm going to hide my cage, hide my high res, and here we have our low poly. Now we're not going to see much, so let's set this up so we have some material. Now this is still looking pretty low poly to me, so what on earth do I have to do? Remember that we can subdivide this as well if you want, but in reality this is pretty much set. So let's just put this into the center. Now let's play around with it a bit. Let's go right click, origin, geometry to origin. Let's rotate this so that we can see it nicely now. Let's also bring in some lights so we can really make this pop. And lo and behold, here is our lovely end result. And all of this is coming from a super low poly model. It's incredible, this workflow. I love it so much. Let's quickly render this and see the end result. Now let's talk about a couple of extra hints and tips about photogrammetry. The first one, how to get scale accurate photogrammetries. It's awesome to be able to have scale accurate photogrammetries, so then you can use them in product design and all the rest. But the nature of the beast is you don't really get this, especially not with photogrammetry, unless you're using LiDAR or something like that. You just don't get it. So how do you go about fixing this? Use a reference dimension. This file is down in the description if you want to download and print it or get somebody else to print it. And between those 2 points, it's 10 centimeters. So I just make sure that whenever I'm taking all the photos of something that I can't measure, or be it in situ, or let's say it's in a big giant rock and I couldn't get the right size, well, I just make sure that this is in the scene, so then I can take this all into Blender and use those 2 points to scale up the entire model to the correct size. Now the next tip is about transparent and reflective materials. They're a real pain to do photogrammetries of because the reflections really throw off the equations. Now, the only real way of doing this non-destructively is to basically mar the surface in some way, be it with chalk, be it with flour, be it with scanning spray, or even masking tape. This is the only real way. You have to try and stop it being reflective. Now there is one advanced way, which is called cross polarization, but it's very advanced, really difficult workflow, but it does give you some pretty crazy results. Now this next tip is an interesting little time saver. Let's say you don't have enough time or power on your computer to do the depth map and the depth map filter, because these take the most amount of time. Well, you can do this. Come down to where it says depth map, select it, right click it, and go duplicate node, and then from here, that's where you want to click, from here. This will duplicate all the nodes and all the connections from that point. Now we're going to delete the depth map and delete the depth map filter. As you see, we have a meshing here that's looking for SFM data, and lo and behold, the point cloud creates exactly that. So we're just going to drag and drop that connection to there. Now, lastly, over here in texturing, we need an images folder. Now, we're going to grab this from our prepare dense scene. Right where it says image folder, we're going to drag that over into here. With all that now connected, right click and click compute. I've already done this, so I'll show you the end result. I'll double click it, hide my structure from motion, and look at this. It almost looks identical, but it's only 80,000 triangles. It's incredible, and it's done in a fraction of the time. This whole thing only took about 7 minutes to compute. Now this next tip might really help you when you're working with gigantic scenes. Our end result here is 672,000. I've gone into the millions when I've been doing larger photogrammetries, and sometimes that won't even open up in Blender. So we need to do a Decimate before we do that. Now here's the trick. We can add a Decimate node into here. So let's right click, add in, search by Mesh, Decimate. Here it is. Mesh Decimate, and now we need to break this connection. Just select the line, right click it, and go remove. Now you can reconnect this mesh into the input and connect that mesh output into the mesh. Now, with that connected, our texturing has basically disappeared, so we have to recalculate it. I'm going to set the simplification factor of the default of 0.5, and I'll recompute this now and show you the result. And lo and behold, if we double click, we now get a textured mesh with half the amount of triangles. It really can be a lifesaver to be able to decimate within Meshroom itself. Now, one of my favorite ways of working with photogrammetry data is sculpting within Blender. Now, I don't have a video out on this just yet, but it will be coming in the future. It might actually already be out, so check the description as I'll have a link to it there, or maybe if you're interested to find out more about it, hit that subscribe button and I'm sure you'll get notified. And personally, for me, my absolute favorite way of using photogrammetry is within virtual reality. As you can see right here, I've got this little snug space that I'm designing and currently building, and I get to check it all out in virtual reality before I even build it. Now, if you want to see the full workflow of how I do this, I will have future videos coming out in Maker Tales, and if they're already out, they'll be linked down in the description. And for the last tip, let's talk about when the bugs and errors happen. And this is going to happen quite a bit within Meshroom. It's just the nature of the beast. It's a very complicated topic. Now, all of these links are going to be down in the description. You have the Meshroom manual, you have the Meshroom Google group, you also have the Meshroom GitHub issue page, and you also have Maker Tales Discord channel that has an entire channel just to photogrammetry, and I'm sure we'll all be there trying to help each other out. The first thing I would say is clear your cache. That is pretty much 80% of the problems. It's right there. Just tell it to recompute and it'll do it just fine. If that's not it, try and clear your local cache inside of your app data files. If that doesn't do it, well, better dive into the GitHub and see if there's any solutions in there. Or even better, come over to the Discord and we'll all try to pitch in. And there you have it. I really hope that gives you a running start into the world of photogrammetry. Now there is always more to learn. The number one place I would tell you to go check out is Meshroom's node system, as I've only just scratched the surface there. Also, if you're interested in any of the files that I have here, be it the actual 3D print files or the render files or any of them, it's all linked down in the description. A huge thank you to my patrons. You guys are absolutely awesome and it means the absolute world to have your support. And if you're enjoying what I'm doing here, you think I'm worthy of your support, I would love to see you there too. Don't forget that we have a Discord and that's linked down in the description and that has a photogrammetry channel. Thank you for watching, keep making, and let the quest continue.